Good evening. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Children, Families and Education Select Committee. My name is Councillor Heena Makwana and I'm the chair of this committee. Details of the business to be considered today is shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. We are not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm does go off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For those in the room, please switch any mobile devices to silent before the meeting starts, and when you're invited to speak, please ensure you turn your microphones on so that you can be heard in the recording. For those watching via YouTube, if you are so minded, you can complete one of our resident feedback forms. These can be found in the information section underneath the YouTube video. These forms are intended to help us improve the way that we run our meetings. Okay, so before we go through our agenda, I'd just like to introduce colleagues around the room. So to my right, I have Councillors Chamdow, Smallwood and Batt. To my left, I have Ryan Dell, Democratic Service Officer, and then Councillors Sweeting, Gill and Sansapuri, and Mr Tony Little, our co-opted member. I also have Debbie Scarborough, our Service Manager for the Adult and Community Learning. So welcome to you all. Okay, agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Ryan.
Thank you. So, yes, we have apologies from Councillor Judge with Councillor Sansapuri substituting.
Okay, thank you. Declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting. Are there any? Thank you very much. Agenda item 3, minutes of the previous meeting. Agreed. Thank you very much. Item 4, to confirm that the items of business marked in Part 1 will be considered in public and the items marked as Part 2 will be considered in private. There are no Part 2 items. So we move straight to agenda item 5, which is the Adult and Community Learning Review 2021 to 22. So Debbie, welcome again. I know we saw you in February when you presented the annual self-assessment report. So welcome. I'll hand over to you. So please feel free.
Okay, so as ever, I know that you have had the paperwork and I know that you read through it in great detail, having been here before. Essentially, about 2 years ago, it was 2021 year, the service was at that point, there was the Policy Overview Committee in operation. It was the precursor to this Select Committee, I believe, and we went through a review, which I know that some of the members were part of. This report that I've submitted is by way of reviewing the outcomes of that council review. There were 5 main recommendations, and I've written a table essentially that takes each of those recommendations and just gives you a brief update. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, great. Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Debbie. I just wondered if I could focus on the, I think it was recommendation 4, the one around the GLA. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the Multiply project and what that's all about. In relation to the increased grant, and just for members, this is page 16 going on to page 17, an increase in 200,000. Is that something that we have gone out and sought and gained, or is that something that the GLA has given to every London authority, and whilst it's great, it's not, like I say, something special, that's an awful thing, so you know what I mean? It's something that everybody's got, and that's point 2. And then point 3 is, what other bids are we bidding for at the moment? Because I think the last time you appeared before was in February, you were telling us that every now and again a pot of something turns up for something on numeracy or literacy or science or whatever it may be. What other bids are we bidding for at the moment, and what do we think our success rate will be, or is there anything we've been successful on?
Okay.
Thank you.
So, to try to address your points in order, Multiply is a project that's gone out through the, if you like, the FE route, so that element between leaving school and whether or not people go to university, but particularly around working with adults. So it's gone out to not all, but many of the adult learning providers around the country. We did have to bid for it. And what they did was they sort of put, what you had to do was more of an expression of interest, but the opportunity to put that expression of interest wasn't given to everybody. They selected the top providers and that's who it went to, because it was all done very quickly. It actually came from an initiative that Rishi Sunak came up with, which links to his promotion of maths and numeracy and how important he feels it is, which is currently in the news, I know. We were very quick to pick it up, and we were awarded the money that you can see in there, nearly 300,000 over 3 years. The purpose of it is to really, obviously, it's to upskill people whose numeracy rather than maths is not as strong as they would like. But the idea is that it's not hitting you over the head with maths. So we're not advertising, nobody is advertising it as come for these additional maths courses. It's all about everyday functional maths and numeracy. So it could be weights and measures. It could be making cakes and measuring them. And the idea is that depending on the target group you're working with, it could be something to do with the business. But in fact, about 3 of our outcomes, of our targets, are to do with helping people who are employed. So the idea is that if it was something that you were aiming at parents with children, for instance, you might be doing, let's come and make a cake together or whatever, let's weigh the ingredients, let's look at ratio, those kind of embedded maths and numeracy elements. If it was to do with a work situation, it could be to do with working spreadsheets, it could be to do with all kinds of things. I taught one myself recently to do with another project we're working on, which was about helping my senior team brush up on how they put projects together for me and put papers together with what are the things you need to consider, what are the numbers you need to consider, do you know how to work out the cost of this in relation to the overall cost of, say, employing somebody, how many hours will it take, what does that mean in terms of money. So it's very, very practical, it's very flexible, and all of us who have got it, and there are a lot of adult community education providers across the country that did, because of where we sit in the league tables, if you like, have come up with lots of different innovative ideas, and so far it's been really, really, really successful. So we had a meeting with the GLA today, and we thought we were, but we found out officially that we've come in at 150% of our target. So we have we've put the first application for an increase in the grants forward, and we're waiting to hear whether that will happen, because it depends on, if everybody's done that, there won't be additional money to go round. It depends on the bigger picture, but we're hoping to get additional money for that. So it's something we can use if there's a need. We could use it for council staff, for instance, to help with particular functions if there's a need for something. So it's a brilliant project. It's for 3 years, and we don't know yet whether that will continue, because obviously in that time there'll be an election, and the impression I've got is that, I was at something that David Blunkett spoke at recently, and he was saying that it sounds like Labour also think it's a really good idea, so it might continue. I don't know. So that's multiply. The 200k, there's a kind of a something answer to this. So it's very rare that anybody gets the opportunity to increase their grant funding allocation. We have come in at 118% over our grant allocation before and still not managed to get any increase in it, so it's very rare. This year, they said there was a thing that came through saying, okay, we're looking at applications for increasing grant. If you want to apply, do. So we were straight on it. We got it applied for. I know of several providers who didn't get that additional funding. This is just through the GLA. So, as you know, for Londoners, we're funded through the GLA. For anybody living outside London, we're funded through the Education and Skills Funding Agency. They both ultimately are funded by the Department for Education. So we put the bid in. We didn't know if we'd get it, but we did. And again, they look at what they know of the provider. You know, they look at quality. They look at your track record. So we were really thrilled, and that will go on our grant now, henceforth. So it's kind of a bit of both. It's not that they've given it to everybody, but the opportunity is presented to people in London. So we were really pleased with that. We found out a couple of weeks ago. And the final thing, there are two things that strike me about the bids coming up. First, obviously, you have to hope that there are some. One of the projects that we've got going has been, we were approached by a council colleague. We've just started to run something called the Holiday Activities and Food Programme. We're doing the food element of it. It's something that has been developed by the government following, I've forgotten his name. Anybody that knows football will know. There's a famous footballer. Thank you. That's the second time today I've forgotten that. I was able to throw it out there a week ago and my brain's gone. So that whole initiative that he started to sort of launch, and about why there was no support for children who needed free school meals outside of school days, has developed into a programme run by the DfE that includes activities and one hot meal a day for those children. So because we moved recently from Brookfield into the Civic, we have now got, as part of that new build, we've now got a fantastic cookery facility, which meant that they came to us, colleagues came to us and said, is this something we could do? So we absolutely did. We spent both the Easter weeks working with, we had a maximum of 8 families with 2 children each, coming in to cook, prepare homemade healthy dinners. They all cooked them, ate them together, cleared up after them, took off various things. There were also sort of extra goodie bags, like there was a box of food for one of the weeks that went to all the families, or most of them, because we didn't get it on the Monday, that had meals for four meals per week for that family, so they ended up taking back that. The second week there were some boxes of resources that we gave them that were about helping them grow a vegetable patch, grow and eat healthier food with all the instructions, everything from earth to seeds to everything else. We weren't responsible for either of those things. Once again, that's other council colleagues that arranged that from the same programme. But so that was one that came to us, and we jumped on it, and we've got all sorts of plans for developing that. There are lots of things we want to do with that. But certainly the first 2 weeks were really successful. We're very pleased with that. There's another bid. This is a capital bid that I am just starting to look into around trying to develop some more provision. But because I'm just starting to look into it, this isn't by any means going to be given to us, but I'm just starting today. I began work on it that might help us in the future, and I'm not sure how much I can say about that. I just don't know. So, and that one I've sought out.
Chair, just to say, I think that's a very comprehensive answer and clearly a recommendation that we can put a big tick against.
Brilliant, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sweeting.
Well done, well done, well done.
Thank you.
I mean, I was part of the committee that looked at that major review on your service area, and we knew it was good because Ofsted said it was good in December 2019. And when we looked at it, yes, I mean, the recommendations are there, yes, things have moved on. But all of the committee recognised that you deliver a good service.
Thank you.
And that continues. I'm coming back to the sort of practicalities of this new approach, much more digital. Now, how's that gone down with the people that you are supporting? I mean, especially ancient people like me that are not so good at the old IT and press the wrong button at the wrong time. And the fact is that you don't produce this large brochure now. It's online, and whether the libraries have helped to smooth this out, you know, and just general queries about how the new system is working.
So it's a mixed bag. What we found, obviously during the pandemic, it had to be digital. There was no choice, and actually we put a huge amount of support in place then, which help people go online, and it definitely made a big difference to them. But there was also no choice, and that was the biggest driver. Since the pandemic, there is a choice, and I'm sure all of you would recognise that it wouldn't be the choice of most adults to learn digitally, particularly when our key target group are people that are low-skilled, low-paid. You know, we're not working with graduates for the most part, although we do have some. So what we've found over the last couple of years is that it's most successful using blended learning, which is sort of the mixture of the two, the classroom and digital. The higher up the study levels you go. So at levels 1 and 2, we do increasing amounts of online learning. So prior to level 1, which is a low-level GCSE kind of level of study, prior to that, it's primarily in the classroom. But the learning materials, much of the homework, much of what they do and how they study in those classrooms is based on online learning. So the interactive whiteboard is on, there's a Moodle page, which is our virtual learning environment for each class. They're encouraged to go into it. Homework is often submitted online. So we're doing it, but we're teaching in the classroom. As you go up into level 1, the balance starts to shift. By level 2, it's getting a little more digital again. It does depend on the subject to some extent, but particularly with vocational qualifications. By then, they're ready for that because they're usually either working or heading into work around level 1, level 2. By level 3, so our level 3 childcare and health and social care courses in particular are have much more of an online element. We've found it does vary by subject. So something like counselling, there's a lot of triage work, a lot of sensitive information is swapped between small groups of 3s around the classroom. That works better face-to-face. Other courses, you can work just as well online. So basically that's how we've now got it, which seems to work very well for our learners. In terms of the brochure, that's quite a big issue for us currently because we're just going into planning the next one. We have had mixed feedback about the brochure not being printed. It's exactly the group that you're describing, and I include myself in that. It tends to be people who are a little older, but that they become, my impression is, they tend to be more adamant about wanting and needing a paper-based brochure the older they get. So the older you go up the age range, the more likely they're going to want to that. This is a real generalisation, but that's what you tend to find. Again, it's also about subject area. So those people who do something like ESOL, we don't print the ESOL classes anyway. There's information about them online, but we don't print them because the whole point is they struggle with English. So there's no point doing a page full of courses. We know what they are. We take people through at their skills assessment and talk to them about best class for them. But something like one of the personal development courses, so something like calligraphy or an arts course, or where you tend to get a higher proportion of people who are who have stopped working, are in retirement, they are used to looking through that brochure and they'll be looking for course A and they might find course B that they hadn't considered doing, that they think, oh, I'm going to try that as well, and they really miss that. There isn't an easy answer to this. I think I know there's a strong impetus to not go back to producing a brochure because of all the sustainability issues in that, and because with the best will in the world, it can be out of date a few weeks after it's printed, because we have a lot of new courses coming on in year. We've updated the website to make sure that the information's always there, and we've still got people on reception who are there to answer phone calls and help them navigate the information. So the information, advice and guidance is still there, but it's not in a format they're used to. And so for some groups of learners, that presents a bigger problem. But I think, we're spending a lot of time talking to them. One of the things that we want to do is for the existing learners we've got who might continue into next year, one of the plans is that their tutors will go through what the options are with them before they finish the courses in June, July, so that they've had their tutor go, this is what we think is coming up, and take them through, so that it's perhaps less scary, for want of a better word. So it's mixed, but I think on the other side of it, we have very flexible provision. When we were planning the brochure for this year, we had no idea Multiply was coming. So now we can put those courses up, we can sort of emphasise really valuable things that are coming up using all sorts of social media platforms. The corporate comms team have been brilliant in trying to support us with that, and we're still looking at new ways of doing it. So I think it's going to take a little while for that to become the norm. But new learners don't seem to have a problem with it. We don't get that feedback from new learners. We tend to get it from the continuing learners.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
It's a completely different subject, but we've now got a youth offer going up for consultation. I don't know if your service is any part of that, having any part of that?
We are in the background. I don't think you're going to find us represented very much in any papers, but we're working increasingly with the youth service. It was the youth service that contacted us about the holidays activity and food programme. We have they were targeted youth, I can't remember what they're called now, but it's the adolescent development service overall that have been using our premises in that those twilight hours between sort of 3 and 6 for the past few years in Brookfield, and have continued here. So they come in and use that, and I know that there are conversations going on about, we've got, hopefully the family hubs are coming online, the community hubs are being considered at the moment, and we've had lots of conversations with people about how we can work with them, with those community hubs, but nothing's formalised yet.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chandal.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, it's great to hear about the maths. Love it. Well, we used to call it arithmetic in my days.
Yeah.
You know how old I am. It's about recommendation of number 2. Now, has this communication campaign, has it supported this soft launch? If we just go into a little detail on that, please.
Much of it are the sort of covered in the things I've just said, really. We spent, it was a very busy summer with the move, as well as the move to online brochure and so on. So we updated the website, not just in terms of sort of smoothing out some rough edges, and not, let me clarify, it's not just the website, it's the website connecting to our management information system provider. So the connections between the two, we'd worked with it for a year, and we looked at it and we knew there were some bits that could be improved, so we spent some time doing that. We changed the look of the website to make it as easy as possible for people to navigate and cut down the clicks they had to take to get there. We also developed some A5 booklets. We divided the types of provision we have into the main types. So we still create and produce a full brochure for adults with learning difficulties, the same way we always did. We've got no plans to stop that. It's very useful for them. It's really important. But the main brochure that Councillor Sweeting was just referring to, because there's a slightly different format, but that information is online, we produced A5 booklets. So one of them was about English, maths, ESOL and digital skills, so all the essential skills. One was about learning for yourself, which was the personal development programs such as the calligraphy that I mentioned earlier, but also the more targeted, community-based, non-accredited provision. So none of those programs in that book have qualifications attached. It's the informal learning. It's about trying to improve your mental health. It could be trying to reduce isolation. It might be that you're feeling a bit on your own now, you've had a life transition and you want to come back and do something, and to some extent, it's about making friends. It's always about the skill. People, I'm essentially talking about calligraphy tonight, but people won't do calligraphy if they're not interested in it. It's about choosing. It might be French or whatever it is that interests you. So it's definitely driven by wanting to learn a new skill. But I think what people find when they get there is that they do make friends. They gain so much more in terms of confidence, somewhere to go, all of that. That's that booklet. And the third was Learning for Work and Life, which is all about the vocational courses. Because many of our learners will come through the English, Maths, ESOL, digital skills route. They'll come in to learn one of those skills, improve one of those skills. And then they start to think, well, if we can do this, maybe we can do that. And so a good proportion of them, and you're going to ask me what they are now, and I've gone blank, I can't remember, but a lot of people then progress into those vocational courses, and they might think, well, actually, I've always wanted to be a teacher, or I've always wanted to work as a healthcare assistant, or whatever it happens to be, a social worker, whatever it is, and they'll go on into that, because by then they know the staff, they know the service, they're feeling more confident and more able. And sometimes it's just that their children have got a bit older and they're able to, take the time for themselves. So we divided the provision into those three main types and put those together, and they've gone really well. They've gone flying off the shelves, and we're just about going to get to the end of the year with them, so that's really good. We have a lot of support from corporate comms. We work with them very closely, and there are e-newsletters. We're always in Hillingdon people now. We've got posters and banners. Social media is really useful for us as well. That generates enrolments and just general interest. One of the things that I know that Emma's really pleased about in comms is that the percentage of people who are on the newsletter list, they've got a number of people. It's 1,800 who have signed up for the newsletter, but it's something like 70% are actually opening it and reading it, which is apparently really high. It's normally about 25%, so that's worked well. But we've also got other ideas. So, for instance, I went for an interview with Uxbridge Radio around Christmas time. I think it was around December, and that went out on Uxbridge Radio talking about the different things we do, and come in, we open our doors, you're more than welcome to learn, all of that stuff. What we'd like to do is a little bit more work with somebody, I've got those in my head now, but it could be anybody, about putting together some videos from our learners. I'd really love to get a podcast started, which I've wanted to do for a long time, but I'd love to do that, to have all kinds of people. Even if it was one a month, it wouldn't need to be loads, but if it was something that we could do, so we could do a day in the life of, have some standard questions for people. We could have learners coming in, we could have councillors coming in, we could have teachers coming in saying this is what this work is like. There are so many stakeholders, employers, what are you looking for? Lots of people we could have, and if they got in the habit of that being there, I think that would be a really good marketing tool, because what is very, very clear is, for all of this, the thing that still convinces adults to go back into learning and try education again is word of mouth. That's still the most effective route. And so if you've got somebody who is a learner talking to you and saying this is what it was like, and yes, I was scared to start with, but actually I think that would be really useful, and it would really increase the confidence of the people that we interviewed, and it would be something else to add to their CV. So it's really win-win if we can just get it organised.
That's great. Yeah, go on.
Just want to say thank you for that answer. What I was really encouraged by when you mentioned about the A5s, that you're going to keep on printing them. It's good to see that we are listening to our clients.
Yes.
And it's not easy for everybody, and to make a decision that we're going to continue doing that, maybe it's for the 1%.
Yes.
I think that is really remarkable and commendable. Thank you.
Thank you. You might be interested to know that we've got a learner council who are elected by their peers each year, and we hold regular meetings with them and ask them to look at brochures, and we have historically as well, and the feedback from them was they liked the A5 booklets. Some of them really wanted, going back to Councillor Sweeting's point, we had that conversation as well, but they understood the reasons why that is not likely to happen again, but they really liked those booklets. The only thing they didn't like was the title Learning for Yourself. So we're trying to figure out another way, but we haven't succeeded so far. But that's not bad, is it? So I'll take that.
Great. Councillor Batt.
Thank you, Chair. Debbie, great report and well done for what you've achieved so far. My question was more about the relationship between employment and the training courses that the work you've been doing. I'm interested to see. I noticed that you've done various fairs that have been quite well attended. I'm just wondering what steps do you take to engage the both public and private sectors in terms of going out there and doing some outreach towards those adults that are learning. I note that most adults won't be learning for employment, but I'm wondering also if you measure the sort of ROI and any statistical data on how the relearning or retraining leads to employment and what the statistics are for that.
Oh, that's a really tough question. Can I have the next one, please? Okay, so there's a lot to that again. So basically there's no easy answer to that one, because if you do your job right, they forget you were ever involved. So the better we are, it's a bit like IT, you only notice it when it doesn't work. The better we are, the less they think to mention it to us. So trying to gather the data about people that we refer to something or we help with a CV or whatever, and then whether they get the job, is proving really difficult. And I know it's something that Ofsted are going to be asking me when they come in soon. So perhaps I'll practice my answer on you. What we do is we try to fundamentally, we're not sending most of our learners, if you look at the learner numbers and the enrolment numbers, most of them will not be going directly into employment from our courses. There are lots of reasons for that. The primary one is that our target group are those furthest away from employment. So generally what we're doing is we're taking working with people who probably can't imagine going back into education, and we're helping them see it's possible and it can be fun and there are lots of benefits, and trying to sort of encourage that those possibilities to become intrinsic, so that they can think, well, maybe I could do something else. So what we try to do is enable them to find employment or further learning if they want to. Another reason for this is that we've tried for years to work directly with employers, and I know this won't be popular or politic, or this is why I'll never be a politician because I'm too straight, but essentially employers generally, what they want and what can be provided are two different things. So, employers recently working with the LSIP work. So London's got to have a skills improvement plan, the local skills improvement plans, so they're all over the country. London's developing its own, and the research that has gone on underneath that has come up with things like employers are requesting 45-minute slots for their learners to learn, and they would like us to be able to, I know that they want us to do there is an initiative coming that we're going to be doing more modularised qualifications, which is absolutely fine. I've got no problem with that. We can do that. But 45 minutes, by the time you get people settled, they're going to need to go. By the time you get them into really starting to concentrate, you're going to have about 20 minutes max. And trying to ask sessional tutors to work for 45-minute slots, they're just not going to do it. So, and we've got the wrong intake of learners. It's not the wrong, it's our intake, but they're not necessarily ready for that step. So we focus on the enabling side. So we work with JCP in terms of we've got a regular newsletter that goes out with all the updated local jobs on it, and that's also printed onto notice boards that we put up in each of the centres. We've got the careers fairs that you mentioned. We do so much support on a one-to-one basis for people who are maybe at the point where they do want to start looking at work, and maybe they need to write their CV or practice their interviews. I can't tell you the number of practice interviews I've done with people, and that's true of all of us. Some people, for whatever reason, sometimes cultural, sometimes choice, aren't in a position to go to work. So we've got a volunteering program that we run, and we try to encourage them to do that. And from the volunteering program, we've got about 20 now people that have been members of staff and are either still with us or have moved through because they've done volunteering, then they've come into work for us as a learning support assistant. Some then go on beyond that to become teachers. Others go off and work in schools as teaching assistants. So that's been really successful. We also work with Uxbridge, it's not called Uxbridge College anymore, HCRC, and West London College, and refer people into various programmes that they've got, because the government run, you can fund boot camps and things called swaps, all these different quite intensive job interview guaranteed type courses where they'll go for sort of 6 weeks or something, and that's what they do, and then they've got links. Most of those, the places that we're working with are bigger organisations that have got direct routes into Heathrow and so on, and so that's a good route. So that it's those things. We've got National Career Service that come in and do careers sort of one-to-one and group sessions with people. But we also work with the early years department in the council, so we work very closely with that team, and we've been training the childminders in the borough for a long time. So we've got things where we'll help them set up their business and run for that first year or two, where they're at most at risk of falling over. So we've got lots of things to do with employment, but I can't sort of roll out a list and say these are the employers, because it just doesn't fit with us to work that way.
Thank you. Mr. Little.
Thank you. Like Councillor Sweeting, I'm a veteran of the original report, and it's nice to see the continued progress that have made, and in your very full answers, you've answered some of the things I intended to ask. But if I may, can I ask in relation to other hard-to-reach groups like people with language problems and recent arrivals and refugees, do you have anything particularly targeted towards them, and are they a priority for the service?
Yes and yes. Yes, we have, and yes, they are. So over the last couple of years, we've been working directly with the Heathrow hotels to try to support asylum seekers. Obviously, you have to get in there, you have to do a skills assessment. We're very lucky in that one of our established staff members it has got a Polish background, speaks it, so has got enough Russian to kind of bridge the gap for Ukrainians and for some of the asylum seekers we're getting through. She said, I'm not bragging about it because it's not that good, they'd tell you it was awful, but it's enough. So that's really helped us working with that group. Recently, we've worked with an organisation called Care for Calais. That's who we're working with this year, because there are many barriers to engaging that group. One of them is that the hotel staff are not trained or geared up or prepared to actually act as advocates for the group, or they're hoteliers. So depending on which staff you've got in the hotel, you'll get more or less support in trying to help reach these guys. They've also got different accommodations, so they don't always have a room that we can host skills assessments and so on. Also, asylum seekers have very, very little money. So if you can put on a course, but if the hotel doesn't have accommodation to use, they have to come into a centre, and they can't always afford the bus fare. So now you've got people walking to the nearest adult education centre, which presents its own problems because they can't always get there, or, you know, various things. So we found a way to do it. We had courses going on through last summer. Was it the summer before? I'm not sure, but we've done them as summer schools. I can't remember now. And that's been really useful. And some of those, yes, it was because some of those went into, a particularly Ukrainian group, went into qualification courses this September, so they've progressed on. One of the things that we're very aware of, but what we've got with that programme is a lot of churn, because you've got people that are suddenly moved away from the area. You know, they've got no notice of it, they don't know. You've also got people who have got mental health issues that we aren't in a position to address, and sometimes they just can't face it. So attendance can be a bit erratic. But you've got others who get there regardless of anything. In fact, most are really committed and grateful for the opportunity. Luckily, it's part of the funding now. It's one of the funding flexibilities from the GLA that they've prioritised this group, which really helps us and enables us to do this work. With the Ukrainians, we know that they are more likely to be here over the longer term. So we've also tried something just recently before Easter called Chatter Cake, which sounds a bit flippant, but it really isn't. It's about trying to address that mental health, social isolation element. So what we've been doing is running sort of once a week for, I think we did it for about a month. Come in, have a cup of tea, have a piece of cake, meet people. Just everything's done in English, so they're still practicing their English, but it's not a talk session. It's just trying to help them meet other people. And we're hoping to work with the School Improvement Service. There's an issue around the children, the asylum-seeking children, firstly trying to find places in schools and then coping with those places when they've got potentially very little English. There is a possibility, it's more of a hint really, of some funding that might be coming through. So I spoke to a colleague, found out about it, and we've put a proposal in through the West London Alliance to say if you could give us some money, we would like to extend our volunteer programme using our ESOL learners initially, but obviously it'd be open to anybody. We already run the volunteering, so we've already got an induction programme that talks about safeguarding and prevent and how to support somebody without dominating them. We'd adapt that, train them so that they could be school support, essentially go in as volunteers in schools to help that particular group. So I don't know at this point whether we've got enough Russian speakers or, there could be other problems, but again, it's an initiative that we're trying to work on, but we do need the funding for that because that will take an awful lot. So we've put the proposal forward and we've got our fingers crossed that they will come back and say that's a good one that could work.
In relation to that, are you working with the charities that also support refugees in this area?
We, other than the Care for Calais that I mentioned, no, we're not directly, but in terms of that particular project that we hope to work on, my colleague who runs the School Improvement Service is working with those people. So we will be, through him, we'll make those contacts a bit more. But we do work with quite a lot of third sector. We work with Grow about employability, for instance. We work with quite a lot. We work with Mind and Age UK and all these different groups. So I think we'll probably, at the moment, how we're feeling is we'll probably go back to the direct links with the hotels next year, because it's great to work with that charity. They do a lot of good work, but in terms of trying to chase people up with attendances and stuff, when you've got a third party involved, there are some details we don't have that we need, so we can't just phone somebody or, try to reach them quite as easily. So we're reviewing it at the moment. We're thinking it through and figuring out the best way forward, but sometimes it doesn't help to bring in a third party. Other times it's exactly what you need. So we just keep reviewing and seeing what's best.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Chair. Just reading through the report, it's really pleasing to see the progress made.
Thank you.
I'm just curious about the new courses. Some really good courses there that really catch the eye. I was trying to think, where did these courses come from? What's the sort of thinking in offering those? Does it come from residents? Does it come from from central government, or different areas? Or
yeah. So essentially, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Essentially, the real answer is it comes from our expertise and our local knowledge. We look into a lot of data. Going back to Councillor Butt's question about employment, we attended a big conference a couple of months back about the LSIP and the plans they're trying to put together, and we got all sorts of local data from that, which was fantastic, which influenced the direction of travel for the qualifications that we want to work to. The essential skills, the English, maths and so on, they don't change a huge amount. They just change alongside any qualification changes, or because they're such a fundamental need. But the vocational side of what we do adapts all the time. So this year, for instance, we found that there was a lot more call for health and social care courses and less call for childcare courses. And what we put that down to is that in health and social care, although there's not a lot of money around, people are crying out for work. You don't have to be massively qualified to get work. So we're doing introduction to, and that's really, we're really pushing that for next year. On the other hand, although the childcare courses had a slow start, they've developed through the year, and the government, with the budget recently, are talking about more early years places, the importance of early years. So we can already see that that's going to make a difference. So where our early years courses in the first half of this year were quieter than we would normally expect, they're already starting to build up. We're starting to get the calls through. So we're already planning for next year to do more of those and to adapt what we're doing. We're looking at taking on modular, doing some modular versions. So in the English Maths ESOL field, the opposite of that is true. We take a slow pace with qualifications to help people build their confidence and get through. This year we're introducing a fast track level to get the same qualifications in 1 year, because we're finding that some people are really ready to move at a faster pace, and we want to capture that group for ESOL in particular. Whereas with the early years change now, we've introduced some level 4 qualifications, but we've also done the real sort of, are you interested in a career in, and we've found qualifications that can be funded that can give you a baseline. So it will talk about things like safeguarding, things like prevent, things like having a duty of care. There'll be a little bit about children with special educational needs, but not loads. And it's such a good grounding. It helps people improve their study skills, figure out what you need to be able to do to fit the homework into your life and cope with the studying and all of those things. And it gives them a time to talk to their peers and to the visitors, the speakers that we'll bring in, to think, actually, I thought I wanted to do social care, but really, I want to be a teacher, or I want to be, whatever it happens to be, I want to work in early years. So we're sort of bringing qualifications, they're merging those at that lower level, so that if they've not quite finished their English qualifications, say, to the point that they need, they can start to do both at the same time, and then they can move up with both, and by the next step they'll know, this is the field I want to work in. So it's about what the funding bodies will fund. We're given a list, I mean it's a long list, but we're given a list of qualifications, and we can deliver anything, but they won't fund it. And obviously we need to deliver funded qualifications. So it's about that. It's massively about local need. We do an awful lot of working with learners and getting feedback and talking to them about what's working, what isn't, what they need. That goes into the pile. And we've got a great team who are very experienced in their subject areas. So they know what's going on. We've got practicing professionals in our sessional tutor team that they manage. So they might have come out of whatever their main subject area was that's actually working in that sector, but the team around them still do, so they can talk to them about what's going on in the industry. So all sorts of things go into that. It's a bit of a cocktail. And then we know that we won't fill all the classes that we plan. We deliberately over-plan to see where the demand's going to be, so we expect to be cancelling classes. And we also know that there will be other initiatives and things that come up in year that we'll then adapt to. So Chattercake, it's just a small, non-accredited toe in the water, came out of the fact that we identified the mental health issues and social isolation, and we thought, let's try something really non-threatening. We're now figuring out how to develop that into something more robust. So some of it's a bit of luck as well, if I'm honest, trying to get the right things and just knowing your stuff, really.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments before we bring this item to a close? Okay, great. Debbie, thank you so much for your time and for your comprehensive answers. I think we've got a real insight into adult community education, and I think, the committee would probably support me in saying that you're working really hard, you and your team, so our thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
Also wish you all the best with all these applications you're making for funding and all the great initiatives that you have too, with the podcast idea. It was really fascinating to hear about it also. Hope it all comes into fruition for you.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure we'll see you again soon.
Thank you. I hope I don't talk too much at these meetings. It's often described as comprehensive. I think I did it again.
The detail's good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, great. So if we move on then to agenda item 6, which is the Stronger Families Hub review, early findings. So just to be clear, what we're trying to do today, this evening, is to start considering our findings, conclusions and early draft recommendations on the review. And just as a quick recap, I was just going to say that to date we've held 5 witness sessions. So remember, the first one set the scene with Anthony Madden here, and then outlined the work of the Stronger Families Hub. Then at the second and third, we heard from our young people and parents and carers. The fourth session was focused on hearing from the staff, and the fifth session was in here with the health representatives. So now that the schools have returned back after the Easter break, I'm hoping that we can schedule in a 6th witness session with the educational representatives. So that will hopefully give us a fuller picture of how this service is working with all these different areas. So just before we kind of go into any discussion, I just want to remind everybody that obviously when we discuss our findings and we do make reference to any of the witness sessions, we need to be mindful that some of these witness sessions were held in private, so please don't mention any names. We need to be discreet and sensitive. But does anyone, okay, Councillor Chamdal, do you want to start off with some discussion? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. One was how are we supporting women from the ethnic minorities, especially non-English speaking, specifically say ladies, for a reason. I'm Punjabi, so I come from an Asian background. We know what kind of behaviours are sometimes accepted as norm, which it shouldn't be. So that's one question. And the other one was about a team. There's a mention of that. I just want to know whether that's a necessity they're asking for, or is it a luxury? They're maybe to cover holidays or sickness. Just those 2 points, please, Chair.
So I think with the first one, we probably have to take it away because, I'm not even sure which department or who may be able to answer that question to get some more detail on that one. So I'm sure that we can take it away, ask officers and get a response perhaps. if you are referring to witness session 4, so voice of the provider, so this is the staff, I think when they made a recommendation of just increasing capacity, I think, in terms of their workload has intensified because it's become a 24/7 service. So when we had a meeting, Mr. Little was there, as was Councillor Sweeting. I think they clarified that 12 to 15 staff would be beneficial to cover staff illness and absence. So it's not so much as a luxury, but it sounds like it's more of a necessity in order for them to work at the level that maybe we expect them to work at. Mr. Little.
Yeah, just to add, the impression I gained was there was a particular fragility with the overnight part of the service, that it was a very skeletal service that was expected, and that it would be vulnerable to any shortfalls for whatever reason.
Yes, agree. Councillor Sweeting.
I think what I've tried to do is to look at the actual statements that were made, particularly at the officers that came to share their workload and their concerns and how they're working, the good things that are happening. And it really was highlighted that we are going to be promoting this very good service. That is, on page 105, paragraph 4, promotion of the Stronger Families Hub. And that's going to take place in all sorts of ways. So if you promote something, we're likely to see more people and more families in need of support. And already from the witness sessions, witness session 1, 2 and 3 as well, but not so much when we had the parents and the children coming. But witness session 1 with officers, witness session 4 and 5, it was loud and clear that it was, the phrases were very tight. We're very tight. And we could do far better if we had this, that and the other. And they also talked about making certain that vacancies were filled, because at the moment it was people sometimes covering when they'd already had a fair degree of hours. And so you've only got to read the minutes of that's before us, which I think is number session 4. And the summary: the hub could function better with a larger MASH team, more senior managers, more key workers, capacity. It's all about the out-of-hours team as well. So I know that we're here to look at the functioning of this and how it could be better, and that we've got to be mindful of finance. Yes, we have. But I think it's loud and clear from the professionals that it is a tight service at the moment, and that the service over the 24 hours, the nighttime slot, is very tight, and you've only got to have one person that's sick, and you haven't got that service. So I do think we need to be mindful of that, and that's the reason why I put together this paper, which I shared with the chair, going through what the witness sessions were saying. Some of those will not be on the recommendations, but I think it needs to be noted in the covering report.
Yes, thank you for that. Before I come to you, Councillor Smallwood, I was just going to actually just tie in with what you said there with in terms of increasing awareness of the service, which is something that is really important. That will dovetail with the extra need for staff as well, so that does tie in quite well with what you're saying. And I do think that's another point that for me did come across, that I don't feel that confident that there is enough awareness around the service. I don't know if it's promoted enough within our local area, but also with out of borough, like I'm thinking particularly with schools, so out of borough schools as well. So it will be really useful when we hear from our educational providers and the staff to see whether they are actually aware of kind of how the protocol works in terms of making a referral, and also in terms of just that knowledge and sharing of information. So yes, so it ties in with that point, increase the service awareness, but also that then we need more staff, I guess, to provide that provision and that high level of service.
If I can also make a comment that we all know that if you get a problem early, it doesn't expand to a worse problem, hopefully, if there's support at that early stage. I mean, my background is teaching. If you get a child at a certain stage and you support them in a certain way, then they go on to flourish. And I think we've got to realise that if, for this area to be successful, we will be capturing problems early on, which won't develop later with financial repercussions of the later service that those families might need.
Absolutely. Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. If I could, just 3 points sort of, I think, jump out to me. The first leads on from Councillor Chamdale's point around the work we do with community groups. I'm thinking about the work that goes on with, Somalian women in Hayes. I'm thinking about the work that goes on with a small amount of Orthodox Jews in Northwood. There is some of these very hard to reach groups who culturally may come from quite complex backgrounds, and I just think there needs to be a real thing about how we reach into them and how we use those community leaders to help promote the family hub. I think is point 1. Point 2 is around mental health. And the provision that we are giving to young people in our schools. I think that mental health is something that is a new, for us, in it being recognised as bad as, if you go and break your leg, right, you wouldn't tell somebody that just don't worry about it, just wander around with a broken leg. But traditionally, sometimes if someone says, I'm feeling a bit down, they go, pull yourself together, which is something that is a barrier that we're breaking down. And I guess there is challenges that all facets of life thing, but I do think that needs to be recognised in the support we get for the family hub. And I'm now trying to remember what my last point was, Chair, but I'm having a complete brain freeze as I've done those two quite well, I think. So come back to me in a moment.
Anyone else? Any other comments? Okay, Councillor Sweeting.
One of my colleagues, Councillor Nelson, attended another select committee, and the issue of CAMS and the incredible need for additional support in CAMS. I think we could possibly look at what that select committee has been saying regarding that. And I know it's not just something that Hillingdon is aware of. This is a national issue after the pandemic, and I do think that on that issue alone, that came across with one of the witness sessions as well, the additional cases that are coming, thick and fast, I think was a phrase that one of the officers used. So liaising with that other committee, seeing what that other committee has been saying, and maybe dovetailing what we're saying in our recommendations would be a good look.
Ms. Little.
Colleague.
Thank you, Mr. Little. Otherwise, I will forget. I think one of the things that struck me was if you'd been involved in the elements of the family had offered you. So if you'd been a looked after child, and then at quite a young age you may have had a baby. Actually, the system worked quite well for you in signposting and taking you through that, and there was like a journey. So if you'd been involved with the elements of the family hub, what struck me is people that may, for whatever reason, suddenly need it, that haven't needed it before, and how we make sure that we know it's there. So I'm thinking about potentially, the very sort of middle class person who may live in my ward in Ruislip, who may end up getting pregnant at 17. Mum and Dad aren't very happy about it, possibly disown them. What happens next, right? I'm thinking about the young lad who, may become a father at a young age. The person that may come from a cultural background where mental health isn't necessarily something that they take seriously. I can't even think what the right words are, but it may not be looked at in the sympathetic light that others may see it. So it struck me that when the one-offs happen, there wasn't necessarily the right signposting, but where people had not relied on the hub or accessed it, they actually went through quite a good journey on a constant but the one-offs we sometimes missed, and it's how we make sure that the one-offs aren't missed and that people know they can access it at any point in their life when they need it, even if it is just once and they get a short-term service from it. Because you don't need to be in it for 18 years. You can just be in it for a couple of months.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Mr. Little.
Thank you, Chair. 2 points, one arising from some of the comments Councillor Smallwood made, but first, what struck me through the whole exercise, both from the staff and from the partners that we spoke to, was the enthusiasm with which the approach has been welcomed by both those groups of people, that they are enthusiastic to make this work, and we ought to say that in our report. But what also struck me was that, contrary, if you like, to the comments that Councillor Smallwood's been making, that the focus of the people we were talking to is very much on the children. And although it's called a family hub, it seems to be a service for the safeguarding and assistance of dealing with children. Their family problems because there's a child in the family that needs dealing with. And so we perhaps need to be careful as to what we're expecting of the service, that it isn't necessarily something which is providing those wider services to families. If they don't think they're doing it, but we think they are, there's a mismatch of expectations, and I'm not sure whether it's me misreading it or whether it's Councillor Smallwood's ambitions are too high, but that's the impression I've gained in it. I'm not saying that in any way critical of what Councillor Smallwood, because he's entirely right in identifying things like mental health problems and the corollary of the inadequacy of CAM services that we've been experiencing for years.
Yeah, I think that the focus is on the early help and prevention, especially for our children and young people, and then it just happens to filter into other areas. But I think my understanding of it is that if it does need a referral to another department, this is kind of the starting point where the assessment is made and then it's referred on to a different department accordingly. But of course, we can get clarity on that again if need be. Councillor Sweeting?
But the 2 witness sessions that we had, one with parents or carers and the other with young people, I mean, certainly the families, the adults, if you like, were being supported along with their children, and that came across very, very loud and clear, I think. So, yes, we recognise that often it's the children or the young people that are there a focus, but it is a family. That's why it's called the Family Hub. And it's there actually to support the family, because it's only by way of the family that you're going to be able to move the whole issue on. You know, when there's a difference between what the parent or guardian is saying and what the child is saying, it's a way of bringing those two groups together. And I think that showed very, very clearly in that session with the adults. Session 2.
Yeah, I think also just touching on Mr. Little's point earlier is that there are many strengths to this service which did come through in all the witness sessions, I think, at some point or another, even when we spoke to the young people, the parents and carers too. I noted that when we spoke to the health partners, you know, they said that a 24/7 service is very impressive and something that I don't think other local authorities are really providing. So we do also need to highlight the many strengths, so obviously be mindful of that too. Councillor Batt.
Thank you, Chair. I think that following from the comments just made, it seems that it would be a good idea for the report to provide some clarity over or reconfirmation of the purpose is of the Stronger Families Hub, and whether or not there's any scope to widen its current activities, if not now, but perhaps in the future, to consider it. The other point I wanted to make was in relation to the promotion of. I completely agree with that. I think that promotion of the Stronger Families Hub and the awareness of the hub should have a focus. And I think liaising with voluntary sector and the charities is also another great example of how perhaps we should go into a bit more detail of how we can go about doing that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you. I think Councillor Chamdale whistled in my ear, "Sweets for the stars," and I've always believed that having ambition. But I think just to speak to Mr. Little's points, I think one of the things that struck me, just even from what Councillor Butters just said, around charities and voluntary sector and community groups, like some of these things are quite low cost, but can have incredible high reward if we're linking them in to play a part in the family hub. And actually, we saw some great examples of doing that. But one of the things that struck me since I've been a councillor is sometimes in all levels of the council, there is more that we can do to link people in and link community groups in and voluntary groups. I'll give the example of, I'm a member of Ruislip Round Table, right? We have charitable funds which we give away. We struggle to give it away every year, right? Because there's not enough things. I mean, I can see Councillor Sweeten's probably going to tap me up for some money now. But what is interesting is how can we do more to do stuff? There is lots of good organisations out there, whether it be business, charities, third sectors, community groups. And how do we link them in to support the hub a lot more? And I think that was probably the crux of my point.
Yeah, absolutely, in terms of early help prevention, but then not relying on the statutory services as well, right? So avoid that extra cost and financial implications.
And if there's a reduction on the cost in the statutory services, you can spend the money somewhere else on things like mental health.
Yes, absolutely. Councillor Sweeting.
Well, that was certainly mentioned in Witness Session 1, where, my comments here, development of stronger links to groups, including, supporting the victims of domestic abuse. That came out in the Session 1, so it wasn't just about that particular group, but other groups, going out and liaising and working with those groups, some of them voluntary, some of them not. So that was mentioned in Witness Session 1.
Okay, any other comments or questions or thoughts anyone has? Okay, right, so I guess the one outstanding witness session, hopefully that will be scheduled and confirmed as soon as possible, and it's open then for members to attend and put forward their questions. Okay, so we'll move on then to agenda item 7, which is the forward plan. Any comments? Okay. Or is it the work?
Just about the SEND strategy, which is going to Cabinet. Is it going to Cabinet before it's coming to us? We're due to have this report in June, aren't we not? So I've probably not read it properly, but is it going to Cabinet before it comes to us?
I believe, yes, it will go to Cabinet and then they'll agree or not to consult on it, and then if they do that, then it will come to us.
Sometimes it seems that we get the chance to comment on reports before they go to Cabinet. For example, our comments from the last committee on school standards, we were able to share that with the Cabinet, and it's going to Thursday's Cabinet meeting. The report going to Cabinet on the schools capital programme says any comments from the Select Committee, no, none, because they have a report on school places, which is not the same as the schools capital programme, by the way. But we could have made comments on that. And all I'm saying is it would be good, if possible, to know beforehand whether we can make comments on a report that's going to a further meeting of the Cabinet.
I think I will double check on that, but if I may.
Okay, all right, thank you. And then moving on to agenda item 8, which is the work programme. Any questions or comments, Councillor Sweeting?
No, I know it's not our committee. We'll have another committee after May. But there were 2 issues that were brought up in the minutes. One was the possibility of doing an audit of SEND children by school, and the other an audit of asylum-seeking children by school. And this is all part of the need for us to improve the standards that we have in our schools. And I was wondering whether that they could be put in as possible agenda items for the work programme. And the third is it would be good to have an agenda item on the school's capital programme. Yes, we do have information on school places, but there are several things in the school's capital programme that we have not seen. One of them being seeking another site for a special school. I don't believe that we had that when we had the last report on school places. So all I'm saying is it would be good to have an agenda item on the school's capital programme, and that could include a budget information as well.
Okay, I think that's been noted, and I think that will be something to be discussed, I think. I can't confirm that will happen or not just yet, so we shall see.
It might not be.
Yes, indeed. Right. Okay, right. So any other questions, comments to make? Thank you so much. Thank you, Councillor Santapuri, for substituting today. I was meant to say that right at the start, but I'll say it at the end now. So thank you for your time, for joining us this evening. And thank you all for your questions and comments and input. I think we had a really good meeting.
And thank you, Chair. It was a good meeting, I think. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you. All right. Have a good evening, everyone. Safe journey home.